is there is no evidence that's been scientifically produced that COVID-19 exists. That is what they want to shut down, even more than the 5G connection.
You don't believe that? You don't believe that coronavirus doesn't exist, though?
Of course. Well, I'll just say to you, produce the scientific evidence that it does. What I've been doing, because I'm a journalist, not a mainstream media repeater of the official story, is I've been devouring information from doctors, virologists, specialists in places like Germany, Italy, Austria, America, who will never be allowed to get onto the mainstream media because they're challenging and demolishing the official narrative. That's not allowed, because this is not about free open debate, it's about selling a lie. Let me tell you a story that comes from these virologists, and in this case, the way I'm started, from the research of Andrew Kaufman, a doctor of medicine who's now specializes in psychiatry in New York State. When people started getting ill in China, the Chinese authorities, and by the way, China is an absolute major global center of this cult, as is America, Israel, Britain, but China's massive. This cult has no borders. It operates across borders. So what they did is they decided pretty much immediately that the reason people were getting ill, and they only did, checked and tested a tiny number of the first nearly 200 that got ill, that it was a bacteria or a virus, and they very quickly settled on a virus. And what they did, and a virus is not what we told it is either. Anyway, they took fluid from the lungs of a small number of these people that got ill, and they broke down its genetic code, the genetic code of genetic material that was in the lung. And they decided that the cause of the problem was a virus. The problem is, they never, and it has never, been isolated to show that that's what is causing this. There was a man in 1890, he was a bacteriologist and physician called Robert Koch, and he developed 4 what became known as Koch postulates, which have been the gold standard for mainstream medicine ever since, of how you prove that an agent is causing a disease. Number 1, all the people that get the disease have to have the same symptoms. Number 2, you have to isolate what you say is the causing agent from all other genetic material. So there's no contamination, you've only got what you say is causing it. You then inject this into a living host, and the living host has to get the disease you say this stuff is causing. And then you have to take material from that living host, put it into another living host, and they have to get the same disease. At that point, with the Koch postulates, you've got pretty damning evidence that that is causing that. None of those things, not one of those postulates, has been done in relation to COVID-19. What they've got is a genetic material from the lungs of those people. And that genetic material contains a lot of stuff that is actually in vast numbers of people. It's not causing them illness, not making them sick, but it's part of their genetic makeup. And if you test for the genetic material, not COVID-19, they've never isolated it, then you're going to get a lot of positive tests, not for some virus, but for genetic material that's in that code that vast numbers of people have. So what did they do then? The Chinese then started deciding who had the virus, they decided without isolating it and proving it, and who didn't. And so they did this first of all on symptoms. And what are the symptoms of coronavirus? Flu-like symptoms, yes, which have a potential large range of causes. Not now. Now, if you had flu-like symptoms in China in that period, you had coronavirus and you had to be isolated, and there was this lockdown. They then start testing. So let's look at the test. The test they're using for coronavirus, they've never isolated it, they're testing for this genetic material. This test is called the RT-PCR test. It was invented by a man called Kerry Mullis in 1984, and he said this test should not be used to diagnose infectious disease. The man who invented the test. And what are they doing? They're saying we are testing for an infectious disease. The other thing the test can't do, openly admitted, it can't test how much of, quote, virus you have. And as one American medical scientist said in a statement that I have on the website, you have to have, in his words, massive amounts of this stuff to be sick. But the test can't say how much you have, so it's irrelevant. They then start moving out, and they prepare us for it. Oh yes, oh that Chinese virus, it's coming, oh yeah. And it starts to move out. Now I know this from many, many different sources, and some of them, quite a number of them now, more and more of the time, in America and in Britain and other places have gone public on this from the medical profession. They were told that flu-like symptoms must now be designated diagnosed COVID-19. And as I say, flu-like symptoms can come from a long list of possible causes, including the flu, of which there's a lot around this time of year. So they start diagnosing COVID-19 cases on symptoms, and the numbers start to go up. Oh, say it could be a pandemic. Eventually the World Health Organization, which is owned by Bill Gates, the second biggest funder only to the United States government of the World Health Organization, Mr. Vaccine, wants to vaccine the world. The front man for the World Health Organization, a guy called Tedros, in other words, Gates' mouthpiece, he says, yes, it's a pandemic. Okay. So then they start introducing this test, this PCR test, and they start testing, but they're not testing for COVID-19. It's never been isolated. They're testing for the genetic material, and lots of people have it, so lots of people test positive. Problem is that while they're doing this, they don't have enough dead people. So they can't produce the fact that this is a deadly virus from the number of people who are dying. So what has happened, and I'll give you an amazing piece of supporting evidence here in a sec. The medical profession were told by the hierarchy, think cult subdivisions in each country, that if someone tests, this is happening all over, by the way, country after country, if someone tests positive for COVID-19, and anyone now who goes in a hospital or is treated, you fall down the bloody stairs and go to hospital, they test you for COVID-19, the genetic material, not COVID-19. They've never isolated. If someone is tested positive for COVID-19, then if they die, then that has to go on death certificate, COVID-19. And so you're having people, and loved ones and families have complained about this, as well as some doctors. Some doctors have come out and said, we've been told to put COVID-19 on the death certificate when they haven't died from it. Some loved ones have said that, their loved one died of cancer, but COVID-19 went on the death certificate. And if you notice, this is a common theme. You see it in the media all the time. The same phrase. You see it from politicians, same phrase. And these medical advisors are all connected to Gates, by the way. Yours in America around Trump and ours in Britain around Boris Johnson. The phrase is, this number of people have died, or this person has died, after testing positive for COVID-19. Not died of it, tested positive for COVID-19. But then they go on the death certificate and they become then, in the official figures, died of COVID-19. Now, if you look at the massive health crisis in Italy, it was based in Lombardy. Lombardy in northern Italy is infamous for having diabolical polluted air, just like China and Wuhan, and therefore they have enormous amounts of lung disease there. And I'll tell you how bad it is for your health in Lombardy. This is the Milan's in Lombardy. The last figures I saw for a year is that a few hundred, less than 100,000 people died in Lombardy in that year. And the next region down for most deaths was Lazio, 57,000. That's how bad Lombardy is. So you have all this lung disease and pneumonia, and they've been redesignating it COVID-19 when they were going to die from anyway from another cause. And the figures go up, and the figures go up, and the figures go up. And I want to read you this story. America. This is a guy who is a state senator in Minnesota called he's doctor himself, Scott Jensen. And he was interviewed on Fox News. And he said this: right now, Medicare has determined that if you have a COVID-19 admission to the hospital, you'll get paid $13,000. And a lot of this is, some of this anyway, is passed on to the doctor. If that COVID-19 patient goes on a ventilator, the hospital gets $39,000. If they diagnose a pneumonia patient as non-COVID-19, they get $4,600. And so there is a financial incentive, which if you add it all up is absolutely fantastic, to keep putting COVID-19 on the death certificate over and above the instruction from organizations like the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that you should, if you suspect in any way that there's COVID-19 involved, although you can't say how much of it, even if it existed, because the test won't tell you that, you put COVID-19 on the death certificate. So these death numbers are absolutely ridiculous, unsustainable and unsupportable. But what have they done? Think of the Hunger Games Society I mentioned earlier, that structure. They have destroyed the independent livelihood through this lockdown of billions of people, destroyed businesses, destroyed employment. Lots of people are going to lose their homes. The banks owned by the cult are going to start, soon as they can, repossessing, because people can't pay their mortgage anymore. And it is already economic mayhem. This is absolutely the Hunger Games Society. Long bread lines form outside of food banks as America struggles to cope with COVID-19 fallout. At least 10,000 cars line up in an orderly fashion in San Antonio, all full of hungry, increasingly desperate people. Thousands already arrived the night before just to get the chance to eat. We just can't feed this many, the CEO of the local food bank said about Texans that had descended upon the place. It's a scene playing out across the country. 1,300 cars swamped the drive-through Greater Pittsburgh food bank. And this is exactly what's been in my books for years and years and years, that they were going to create some kind of major incident that led to the demolition of independent livelihood, so this Hunger Games Society would be created in a very short time. And that's what we're looking at. And you see, if they released a virus, they release, say, a bioweapon, some people claim, out of this Wuhan lab, then you lose control of it. You don't know what it's going to do. It's going to kill a lot of the people you don't want to kill. And people will be dead in the streets. But if you invent a virus and you control the perception of it by controlling the way that it is administered and registered in death certificates, you can decide when the numbers of perceived dead go up and when it starts to fall. And then, and watch for this, mate, after a respite, you can then have a second and third wave, and those waves will come just before the vaccine is ready at Gates's London. And we should ask ourselves, what will be in that vaccine?
So, David, you covered 50 items. So I have to go back. I have to go back and unpack some of these things here because there were a lot of statements were made. And let me go through, and then you'll have your time to respond, just like I gave it to you. One, you said coronavirus, COVID-19 is not real. That's one. Okay. So then from there, you said that the CDC and the World Health Organization, who the number 2 largest funder is Bill Gates after US, depending if US pulls out, then it's a different story. And you know, Trump and Tedros are having issues, and we know Tedros is very good friends with China. That's something that everybody knows, the pictures, the relationship, things change when they were part of it. Everyone knows that none of that is private. But if this was something that they wanted to spread to make it real, he would have called it a pandemic sooner rather than later, because the criticism CDC gets and the World Health Organization is getting from Trump today is for not saying it earlier that is a pandemic, rather later, which is a big criticism that Trump's given him. So let's put that aside. Now, as far as Gates goes with vaccine and his comments about depopulation or reducing population growth that he made to Dr. I think Goodall from CNN back in 2011, February, when they did that interview, fine. Let's just say there's an element of reducing population growth, and we can put some weight behind that because, yes, Gates is Mr. Pandemic 2015. He gave a talk at TED Talk, and he's projecting and predicting TED Talk. Fine, we can give some that credibility to that. And then, but then you're taking some of the stories and you're linking it together to give it more credibility, to connecting the dots. That loses a little bit of credibility. Here's why. Let me say why. This is why. If they're getting paid $39,000, the hospitals, if a person dies from COVID-19 versus the number you gave of $4,900.
If they die, if they're diagnosed.
If they have the ventilator. If they're diagnosed, they get $39,000, and they don't, they get $4,900. From the senator you talked about, who's also a doctor. Okay, let's just say that's the case. And let's just say in Italy, all of those people that died, you know, and they're putting it in that, hey, he died from coronavirus, but he had pneumonia or other issues. Fine. This is the part that I don't give that part of the story a lot of credibility, is because if all of these nurses and doctors and people who are on the inside that are helping out, and if it's all being fabricated and it's non-existent, 100% someone's going to be a whistleblower. 100% someone's going to come out.
We have them. We have them. That's the point. So we should never underestimate the power within an organization of being told what to do.
Not everybody.
Not everybody. That's why we have whistleblowers.
I agree with you.
Go onto my website and look at the doctors that have come out and said we are being told to put coronavirus on the death certificate when they've not died from it. There are some whistleblowers, and there will be more because people are.
That's the part that will gain credibility, because that's the part that's not happening.
There will be more, but there are already enough to show that it's.
But you cannot say coronavirus is not real. I mean, you saw the news.
I've just said it. What I say to you is show me the scientific evidence that COVID-19 exists, that it's been isolated as a particular agent.
Are you asking the question if it's natural or man-made? Is that what you're asking? Are you asking?
No.
Simply saying
they are testing for a genetic code.
Yeah.
Not a virus. I mean, I've got statements here from medical professionals and people like a medical scientist in America who calls the test a Mickey Mouse test that's not testing for COVID-19.
Sure.
And that was said some 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now more and more people are saying, well, it's not testing for COVID-19. I'll tell you another story. And you can go onto my website and...
we'll put the link below, Bobby. We'll put the link below. Everybody can go see it.
DavidIcke.com, yeah. You go to the website and you'll see a video by a New York intensive care doctor. And he's named there. And he did this video in desperation because he was saying we were told to get ready to treat an infectious disease called COVID-19. He says on the video, that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing an infectious disease, COVID-19. What we're seeing, he said, in the worst of the patients, because the vast majority have no symptoms. Why? Because there's no virus. What he's seeing, he said, are lungs he's never seen before. And the only way the lungs could have got into that state, in his analogies, is from someone in an aircraft at 30,000 feet, which went into depressurization and the oxygen sucked away. Or another analogy of his, someone was plonked on the top of Everest without any acclimatization and by definition no oxygen. That's the state of their lungs. Their lungs are suffering from oxygen deprivation. I'm not, saying, oh yeah, this, that and the other, but I will say this, and this is admitted, by the way, by the telecommunications industry, at 60 gigahertz, 5G millimeter waves interact with oxygen molecules in a way that affects the oxygen. An offshoot of that at 60 gigahertz is that the human body and blood cannot absorb oxygen. And if you're hit by 60 gigahertz, those are the lungs that you would have. So it's about looking at the evidence and seeing how the dots connect and not getting anything off the table. And so we should...
I don't mind doing that, but to say from a level of certainty, David, you scare a lot of people when you say from a level of certainty. I understand there being a level of doubt, because think about it. You know who Li Wenliang is, right? You know Li Wenliang. He's the gentleman that was the doctor, the 37-year-old doctor that was a whistleblower in China at Wuhan, who came out and said, this virus could spread, and this is not a regular virus, and China didn't give it any attention, and this doctor died a couple weeks later, but he is saying it's a real virus. It's something that could really spread. And then yesterday, news breaks out. I don't know if you saw the press conference with President Trump, where another source came out yesterday. Yahoo shared it. Fox shared it. Multiple different platforms around the world have shared it. Sources believe coronavirus originated in Wuhan lab as part of China's effort to compete with the U.S. COVID-19 originated in Wuhan laboratory not as a bioweapon, but as a part of China's effort to demonstrate that its effort to identify and combat viruses are equal to or greater than the capabilities of the United States. Multiple sources who have been briefed on the details of early actions of China's government and seen relevant materials told by Fox News. And then obviously there was an agent who went out, and once he went out and he shared it with people, sources believe that the initial transmission of the virus was bat to human, and that patient zero who worked at the laboratory then went into the population in Wuhan, and then it spread. And one thing I will give credibility to is China knows they can't fight with America or other nations purely just as military, but they want to fight it based on biowarfare, chemical, computer and virus dissemination, environmental destruction, drug trafficking. That is their game. Their game is maybe more manipulation. I may give more credence to that, but to say coronavirus is not real, even the people that don't respect the Chinese government, who are doctors in China who died or were killed, said this is a real thing. That's the part where sometimes when I hear that, it makes, when the audience and everybody calls me saying, Todd, what do you think about what this David Icke said? And you agree with them. I said, there's some stuff that he says true, but some of it is sensationalized and it scares the hell out of people.
No, it's not sensationalized at all. You sensationalize stuff if you overcook the pot. What I'm looking at is evidence that's come from virologists and come from doctors and come from specialists around the world who are saying this is not a lethal virus that they are claiming it is, and they've not isolated it, thus they cannot prove it exists. So if something's coming out through government, then I don't care what they say. I've spent 30 years investigating governments, and they are invariably lying to us and want us to believe something because it's taking us off the scent. And in terms of, this is a lethal virus and it could spread. Well, show me that. Well, a number of things. Show me the number of bodies, dead bodies, that relate to a lethal virus. You can't, because they're not there. Why are they having to fix the figures? Provable fact. Just talk to the medical professions who've had their guts to come out to increase the numbers if it's a lethal virus. Why would they do that? Why would they have to do that? Why would they have to give incentives for people to, in hospitals, thousands and thousands of dollars incentives to diagnose COVID-19 if it was a lethal virus and it was all true? Why would they? And if it is see that Wuhan bio lab is a level 4. That's the highest. And if it's a level 4, it's dealing in absolutely lethal bioweapons.
Okay.
So something was released from there. Where's all the dead people then? You know, you've got to look at the fact.
You mean that?
Not
I think it goes up.
look at statements from governments, but to say, does it add up? The numbers do not add up. Tucker Carlson is now, I saw him in the last couple of days, now starting to get it, slowly but surely. The others will never get it. And he started to say, hold on a minute, how lethal is this virus? Because the numbers are coming down and down and down in terms of the percentage of people who are claimed to have died from it, even with all the manipulation.
Just went in different places.
And we're now closing in on equivalent of flu. And this is something else I want to say about how this has been done, and maybe someone could explain this to me, why they've actually had to do this. One of the key tools that this cult uses, and it's through its gophers, to manipulate events, is computer models. It's computer models that told us that well by now, years ago, the North Pole would have disappeared in the summer. It hasn't. And these projections that have caused these lockdowns, which has caused this economic Armageddon, have been done from computer models, and they've been done through an organisation in London called Imperial College, not least a guy called Professor Neil Ferguson. Ferguson and Imperial College are funded, or have funding, large funding, from Bill Gates. Then you have this other organisation in America called the Johns Hopkins University Medical Operation, which is organising assimilating all the numbers, which the media are constantly quoting. Something else I could talk about at length, and their connections, not least to people like Gates. And this Ferguson, because you see, when it came to Britain, the Prime Minister, like Trump has pushed back on it to an extent, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, clearly did not feel that what has happened needed to happen. He was asked if the professional soccer league should stop, and he said, no need for that. It was the soccer league itself that shut the football down in this country, not Johnson. Johnson said there's no need to close the schools. It's all, we'll deal with it. And then Professor Neil Ferguson came out with computer model projections. Wait for this. That up to 500,000 British people could die from this virus. Immediately, of course, you're saying to a Prime Minister, to be fair, this is how many could die, our projections say so, and you'll be responsible if you don't lock down the country. So immediately there was a big backtrack, and Britain was locked down, and we have, like America, economic Armageddon and human Armageddon. Immediately the lockdown was in place, Ferguson and Imperial College start reeling back and saying, oh no, probably less than 20,000. But the 500,000 has got the lockdown. And computer models are perfect because what comes out as a projection is dictated by what goes in as data. He was the man, by the way, who said that between 1 and 2 million plus people in America could die from this virus. Same guy. And there's a scam going on here. There's a scam of creating a massive manufactured problem that devastates and destroys the world economy and hurls billions of people into the lower reaches of this Hunger Games society. That's what's going on. And they don't need a virus for that. They just need the perception of one.
So you just went to two different places, David. First, you said virus is not real. Then you went to Tucker Carlson is getting it because he's saying the fact that it's not as infectious as others are saying it is. Those are two different conversations.
No, they're not. No, they're not. No, they absolutely are not.
One is a lower or not score.
No. Wait a minute. It's about perception.
No, those are two different statements. I have to hold you accountable to that, though, David. You said this.
Hey, please, they're not two different statements. Just let me explain for a second. It's about perception. My perception is, from my research ever since the start, is there is no virus. Tucker Carlson's perception is that there is, and his first movement away from the official story is that the infections and the death rate of the virus he perceives to be real is nothing like they're telling us. Therefore, he's starting to question the official story while still believing there is a virus. I am going much further than that. So he has a different perception of me in terms of the virus.
Fair enough.
What he's doing is moving away from the official narrative and starting to question it. And if he goes on questioning it, he'll end up where I am.
I don't know about that.
He'll never say so.
I don't know about that part, because about the non-existent, that's a completely different conversation.
Well, that's all right. Don't believe it then, mate. Again, as I've said all along in this chat, I'm not trying to get people to believe anything. I'm saying here's some information that you will. And by the way, let us not forget this. This guy in a one-bedroom flat in England has done one interview, more than one interviews on this subject. The mainstream media, 24/7, in every single country, is banging out, unquestioned, the official story that's given to them by the authorities, unquestioned, just banging it out, repeaters, propagandists, and yet someone having a different view is somehow outrageous. And look at YouTube and Vimeo and Facebook. One guy in this little flat in England does an interview with Brian Rose on London Real, and it was like someone shouted fire. One guy, compared with the global media putting out the official story. Why? Because truth is far more powerful and lethal than lies.
I don't, we're on the same page with the media. I don't think you're going to get any kind of dispute there, because I agree with that. We both know only a handful of people own a majority of the media worldwide, and we need more free platforms like YouTube. But you also know, if you're married to a woman and you got a wife, you can say I love you a million times, and you say that one word. Once you say the wrong thing to your wife or your spouse, they're going to remember that one thing, not 1,000 times you said I love you. Kids have this issue with their parents. I will never forget when I was 7 years old, you said this, but I took care of you the other 11 years, but that one time. So you said a lot of things that are things to really think about, but a couple things you say kind of takes it to a complete different direction. So let me go a different route. Now, still on the topic of 5G, I'm curious to know what you think about this here. The CEO of 5G, Huawei, stepped down yesterday. I don't know if you heard or not. The CEO of Huawei, he stepped down yesterday, Ren, and a new guy was replaced named Jinfu, which no one knows a lot about him. And a couple things happened here. This has to do a little bit with you. British intelligence is now saying that UK needs to reconsider their relationship with Huawei. And when they said this, British, you're from UK, stricter control of high-tech and other industries Huawei sent an open letter yesterday, which you ought to read.
Yeah, I saw that.
Not to change its partnership on 5G with Huawei, or else it will cause them harm. Now, this is similar happening to France as well. The difference is Britain, UK had kind of agreed to want to do this. I've never been too comfortable with Huawei. I've never trusted Huawei. I've never seen the intentions there. And my thoughts are different than yours, where you think 5G is helping coronavirus spread, which I'm not there at all. I'm more from the standpoint of China wants to be able to control, and their motivation was to control and gather data. And one of the ways to do it is to do this. What made it very interesting is the following. While they're negotiating with France on these ventilators, the medical equipment that China's making for France, China has said, if you want the medical equipment, you have to be willing to install Huawei 5G in France, and France is now backing out of it. So what are some of your thoughts with what's going on with Huawei and 5G? Not from coronavirus standpoint, just purely from Huawei 5G standpoint.
Well, first of all, I keep coming back to this, but it's important. I'm not saying that 5G is causing the coronavirus, because I'm saying that there's no evidence scientifically that there is one. There's coronavirus, there are a big family of viruses, but I mean COVID-19. What I'm saying is 5G is incredibly destructive to the human body and the human mind. Because of its frequency power. By the way, just a very quick one. The American law enforcement and the Israeli law enforcement, and it'll be the same around the world when it gets there, use 5G frequencies to disperse crowds of protesters. Because what they do, they have these trucks and they fire this millimeter wave 5G frequency range frequency. And the skin is an antenna. This is well known by science. The skin is an antenna. It decodes frequencies. And what the skin does with these 5G frequencies from these military law enforcement trucks is they decode this frequency they bang out into a feeling that their skin is on fire. This is all in military documents. It's not speculation. And the people scatter because they want to get away from the frequency, so their skin doesn't feel like it's on fire. So that's one frequency, part of the frequency band of 5G. The idea, when the skin and the sweat ducts, scientists have pointed out, are antenna that interact with 5G frequencies, that's not going to be damaging, is insane. And one of the things that 5G does is undermine the immune system, and therefore will open you up to a lot of other things. But what I'm saying about 5G and this alleged virus is that this extreme lung condition that some people seem to be getting, that is equivalent to oxygen deficit. This 60 gigahertz frequency of the 5G range would produce that. That's what I'm saying. My main point is not about 5G. It's about the fact that the virus death rate and case rate is being manipulated by A, the test, and B, the diagnosis of COVID-19 for everything that moves. So, but what is happening? I talked about this smart grid, where everything is connected to a smart web. All your domestic appliances, your smart meters, eventually the human brain connected to AI. It's all connected to this grid called the smart grid. And it's what I've been calling for decades the technological sub-reality they were in the process of creating. Now they're calling it the smart grid. And we're having smart cities and all this stuff going on. Now for this smart grid to function, it needs at least 5G levels of commutative power. And for the smart grid to encompass the entire planet, there has to be 5G on every inch of the planet. That's why the Musks and people are putting tens of thousands of satellites up, firing 5G at the Earth to cover the entirety of the Earth, because it's part of this technological sub-reality system to be run by the technocrats controlling the Hunger Games society. And you know how many people around the world are sitting at home because their business is considered non-essential. And people who go out are picked up by the police and fined, sometimes even jailed, for being out of their homes at the wrong time or in the wrong place. But what is considered essential business and work is banging out worldwide, and the evidence for this is overwhelming from people who've said, oh no, another 5G towers are going up around my house. Somebody says it in this country, in that country, in that country. It's overwhelming. And I know because it's happening around me, is that while people are under lockdown, house arrest, and there's no possibility, at least unless people challenge authority, of protest, 5G is being rapidly rolled out all over the Western world and beyond. By the end of this, they will have this 5G communicative system with more and more satellites going up, getting closer and closer to what they want to run this smart grid, which will include controlling the human brain via AI connection. So whether it's Huawei or some other company, in the end, as you go back, you'll find they're controlled by the same force ultimately, which is driving this whole smart grid. And what you get, I said that the cult has no borders, but it wants to maintain an illusion of borders and an illusion of competition, to maintain the illusion that there is no force that's behind all of it. So these things between China and America and all these things, yes, on one level they're happening, but get to the cult level of both countries, they're both on the same team, driving the world in the same direction.
And that same team, are you going back to the whole New World Order and Illuminati, all of that when you say the same team?
Yeah, they're all names for different aspects of the same web, yes, and different aspects of and specializations within the web. Yes, they're all connected.
So who would you say is the most powerful family right now in the world? Any names today that you would say are the most powerful? If you're saying there's somebody behind closed doors that's moving everything like a puppeteer, who are the most powerful people in the world?
Well, if you look through the history of this, the Rothschilds have been massively at the heart of this, so have the Rockefellers. But if you go deep into the web, to those secret societies around the spider, they won't be on public display. They won't be on public display. And therefore they're very difficult to identify. But you can identify their outcomes, their agendas as they play out. And because there is an agenda that can be accessed if you work your arse off, then that's why my books have been so accurate, because you expose the agenda, you predict the future. The whole point of my life is to alert enough people of what the agenda is and where it's going for there to be an intervention to stop it. That's the whole point of what I do. I mean, I could do other things with my life, but I get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I work all day till I go to bed, and I do that 7 days a week, because I'm just coming up now, you mentioned earlier, April the 29th, to my 68th birthday. Another 2 years I'll be 70. This is not about me, and it's not for me what I do. I don't want to see my children and my grandchildren living in a global, Orwellian, fascistic, technocratic, controlled, non-democratic world. I don't want anyone else's kids and grandkids to be living in that. That's why I do what I do. And what's in it for me? Oh, he makes lots of money. Oh, really? So why do I live in a one-bedroom bloody flat, and have done since 2001? I'm not a material person. I want to see the world being free from this manipulation and this control, which is getting more incessant by the day. And that's what I do. And I'm saying, here's some information, make of it what you will. Because I'm not trying to convince anybody. Well, that's a mug's game. people have to come to their own conclusions and not be forced and manipulated into doing so.
David, have you ever read the book Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard?
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah. Well, I think that L. Ron Hubbard, of course, was in naval intelligence, as I recall. I think the whole Scientology thing is an aspect of this cult. Same with some of these other religions like Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff. And because all these groups are compartmentalized, the vast majority of people in them will have no idea that they're part of this web, but the core will, and that's how it works.
Who do you trust? Who do you trust today? Who does David Icke trust today?
I trust my own instincts, my own intuition, based on factual support. I trust my family because they have shown themselves to be extraordinarily loyal and genuine. And I trust other people who have shown themselves over a period of time, a considerable period of time, to be trustworthy and to care about what they're doing and to be committed to it. And other than that, my jury's out until until it's shown to me otherwise.
You know what part was impressive? I'm going to go to the last part here and we'll wrap up, is the fact that you and your first wife, Linda, were married for 29 years. And there was a scene of you guys talking and you're still friends, even though it didn't work out, you're still friends. And your relationship, that said a lot about if somebody's been with you for 29 years and she's still, even after that.
Right, we were together, married for 29 years, but we're still together. She's a great friend and support, lives just down the road.
Very interesting, by the way.
10-minute walk away all these years later. I met Linda for the first time at a dance hall when I was a professional footballer, a really young one. And that would have been in 1971. We met. We married within a matter of literally a few months with no money. She's still my mate. So, you know, relationships may change their nature, but love never dies.
That's a whole different topic, but I just wanted to bring that up. That was impressive. David, I'm going to give you names and tell me the first word that comes to your mind. It's called Speed Round. I'll give you a name. Tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
All right.
Okay. Tedros Adhanom.
I don't get that one.
Tedros. He is the director of World Health Organization.
Oh, Tedros. Gates' mouth.
Bill Gates.
Psychopath.
Elon Musk.
Psychopath.
President Trump.
Someone who doesn't really understand what's going on around him, has certain instincts which are pushed back by those around him who are controlling events, and owned 100% by Israel.
Boris Johnson.
Bewildered. Allowed himself to be bounced into this by the dark suits.
Winston Churchill.
Not what he appeared to be.
Xi Jinping.
Who's that?
Xi Jinping, the leader of China.
Oh, the present guy?
Yes.
A cult operative to his DNA.
Anthony Fauci.
Gates' mouthpiece.
Andrew Kaufman.
Genuine man trying to do genuine things.
Princess Diana.
Died because of what she knew.
Alex Jones.
Someone who's done his best for a long time to alert a lot of people. Don't agree with everything he says, don't agree with everything he does. But he's made a contribution to a lot of people waking up.
Queen Elizabeth.
Bloodline of the cult. And the idea that we have a head of state chosen by bloodline in 2020 is hysterically ludicrous.
John Robinson.
Who's that?
Okay, it's fine. John Lear.
Read a lot of his stuff a long time ago. I think he knows a lot about hidden technology and all that side of things. But it was back in the 90s I read his stuff.
Gary Allen.
Jerry Allen?
Gary Allen. Gary Allen.
Oh, Gary Allen. Oh, yeah. I read his books a long time ago, and I think he had a lot of correct things to say.
Richard Hoagland.
Richard Hoagland. Yes. He's the space NASA man. I've not heard about Richard for a long time and what's happened to him, but yeah, he's got some interesting things to say. Don't agree with all of them.
Jim Marrs.
Lovely guy. A good old boy who saw that the world was not like he was told it was, and did a lot of great work from the Kennedy assassination onwards.
Stephen Greer.
Wouldn't trust him to tell me the time in a room full of clocks.
Wow. Bob Hope.
If people knew the real Bob Hope, they would be staggered. Involved in mind control programs and abuse of women.
Kissinger.
One of the most evil people ever to have drawn breath in my lifetime on this planet.
David Icke, thank you for being you and telling us your story and spending nearly 3 hours with us. Some of the topics a little bit uncomfortable, but you were willing to talk about it, and I appreciate you doing that. And we're going to put the links below of everybody that can go to your website for the stories that you were talking about. If you could kindly send us the specific links, we'll send them there. And again, appreciate you for taking time to come in and being a guest on Valuetainment.
Been a real pleasure, mate. It's been a real hoot. Thank you very much. See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye.
This interview almost didn't happen, but it happened because we got thousands of comments and messages from people saying, Patrick, can you get him on? And we will. I want to hear your thoughts, by the way, on what you took away from this. Obviously, at this point, many comments have been going on. How much of what he says do you agree with? How much of it are you neutral? How much of it do you say, I just don't believe any of that? Comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, I have 2 other videos I want you to watch. This is an interview I did with an economist that we talked about the link with what's going on in the economy with Daniel DiMartino Booth, which is an incredible video. Click on this one here. And that's another video I did with somebody who lived in China for nearly 2 decades, Gordon Chang, as a lawyer who gave a complete different perspective on China. Having said that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.